She was bound to find out eventually.
Does it really matter?
No.
Are you just gonna stand there in the light all day?
How can you be so calm about this?
She's no longer just looking at the woman she used to be. She's looking at the woman she's becoming.
I remember waking up that morning, the sun shining just right through the windows. It was supposed to be another ordinary day, smooth, calm, uneventful. I had everything I wanted: wealth, status, and a fiancé who was supposed to be my forever. I had it all, and I thought nothing could shake it. But I was wrong. The moment I stepped into the house, everything shattered. There, in the living room, was Jason, my fiancé, tangled up with another woman. A nurse. Of all people. She was supposed to be there for me, to care for me when I was sick. But here she was, wrapped in his arms, her hands all over him like they belonged there. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, my heart started hammering in my chest, and I couldn't move. For a split second, I wanted to scream. But nothing came out. Jason looked up at me, his face blank, like this was no big deal. I felt my entire world tilt off its axis. "Jason, what is this?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice shaky, betraying the calm I was desperately trying to hold on to. He pulled away from her, but not with the urgency I expected. He didn't even look guilty, just annoyed, as if I were interrupting his afternoon nap. "Relax, it's not what you think," he said, wiping his mouth, then casually tossing me a glance. I couldn't believe it. "Not what I think? Not what I think?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper, as I took a slow, shaky step forward. My legs felt weak, my body felt numb. You're with her. You're with her in our house." He sighed, like he was tired of my questioning, tired of pretending. "It's just sex, all right? It doesn't mean anything." His words hit me like a slap to the face. "It doesn't mean anything?" I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, but everything was jumbled. I wanted to scream, to shout, to throw something, anything to make sense of what I was seeing, but all I could do was stand there, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. The nurse, who had been silently watching, finally stood up, adjusting her scrubs. She didn't even have the decency to apologize. "I think I should go," she muttered, but she didn't look sorry. She looked smug. "Yeah, go," I said, my voice cracking now. "Go and never come back." She shrugged and walked out, leaving me alone with him. As soon as the door closed behind her, the silence between Jason and I was deafening. He didn't even try to apologize. Instead, he leaned against the couch, crossing his arms like this was all just a minor inconvenience. I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions, but my hands were trembling. I started, my voice breaking. "You really don't even care, do you?" Jason didn't even blink. He simply shrugged again, looking at me like I was the one who was overreacting. "Look, it's not a big deal. We've been together for years, and you think I haven't gotten bored?" You knew this was coming. His words hit harder than anything else. I knew. I repeated, feeling the anger rise in my chest. You think I knew you were cheating on me? You think I knew you were betraying me like this? Are you insane? He looked at me, his gaze cold. I don't need to explain myself. You've always been too busy with your career, with everything else. I wanted someone who would actually be there for me. I couldn't even process the words coming out of his mouth. So that's it? You just replaced me? Basically, he said, his voice so indifferent that it made my stomach churn. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face before. This wasn't just about love. This was a betrayal of my entire existence. Jason had made me feel like I was enough for him, that our future was set. But now? Now, I saw the truth for what it really was. I had been blind, naive. This wasn't just about the girl. It wasn't even about the affair. It was about me. I had spent all these years thinking I was building something with him, only for him to throw it away as if I didn't matter. And for what? A nurse? I can't do this anymore, I said quietly, the tears finally starting to sting my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Jason didn't even flinch. Fine, he said, turning away, as if it didn't matter. Do whatever you want. I don't care. And just like that, everything I thought was real was gone. The days after that moment felt like a haze. I didn't know what to feel: anger, sadness, disbelief. All of it swirled together in a confusing mess of emotions, pulling me in every direction. My life had been flipped upside down in an instant, and I couldn't find solid ground. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. The worst part? The way people started treating me. They didn't say anything outright, but I could feel their eyes on me. The pity in their gazes was almost tangible, like they could see the cracks in my perfect life, the broken pieces I was trying so hard to hide. I had always been the one with everything under control: the successful career, the charming fiancé, the flawless reputation. But now? Now, I felt like a shadow of the person I had been. Everywhere I went, people seemed to tiptoe around me, almost afraid to breathe too loudly. At work, my colleagues gave me soft, sympathetic smiles, and I could hear the whispers when I wasn't around. I hated it. I hated that they were also aware of my pain, that I couldn't even go through a normal day without feeling like the whole world knew I'd been betrayed. But it wasn't just the outside world. It was Jason. He hadn't changed one bit. In fact, the more I watched him, the more disgusted I became. He acted like nothing had happened, like everything was still fine between us. No apology, no regret, not even a hint of guilt. Just that cold, indifferent look in his eyes whenever I glanced his way. It was like he didn't care about the destruction he had caused. I could feel myself shaking with anger whenever I saw him. He walked around the house as if nothing was wrong, eating his meals, watching TV, acting like the man I thought I knew was still the same. I took every ounce of willpower not to break down in front of him. He didn't deserve my tears. I had promised myself that I wouldn't cry for him. Not after what he did. Not after everything I had given him. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness gnawing at my insides every time I was alone. At night, lying in our bed, the bed that used to be ours, that used to mean something, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the silence around me. Jason's snoring filled the room, but it didn't bring me any comfort. Instead, it made my heart ache. I remembered the nights when we had talked for hours, when I had believed we were building a future together. Now, I couldn't help but wonder, how could I have been so blind? How had I missed all the signs? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on the life I thought I was building, on the man I thought I knew, that I had ignored the cracks in everything around me. Jason had been pulling away long before that moment in the living room. The late nights, the disappearing acts, the coldness in his touch. All of it had been there, right in front of me. But I had refused to see it. And now, as I lay there, trying to block out the sound of Jason's breathing, I couldn't help but feel like a fool. How had I allowed myself to believe in something so fragile, something built on lies and deception? I had given him everything, my trust, my heart, my future, and in return, he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The tears came then, but I refused to let them spill. I wiped my eyes furiously, trying to hold it together. He wasn't worth my tears. I had to remind myself of that every single time I wanted to crumble. He wasn't worth it. And yet, I couldn't shake the emptiness inside me. I kept telling myself I was stronger than this, that I could get through it, but every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was his face, the man who had promised me everything and had thrown it all away without a second thought. I had to find a way to move on. To pick up the pieces of my life. But how could I do that when I couldn't even trust myself anymore? When I had been so wrong about the person I loved? How could I have been so blind? Something inside me shifted that night. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no flash of revelation or thunderous epiphany. It was just a decision. A quiet, solid realization that I wasn't going to sit around and let Jason destroy me. I could feel the weight of my own helplessness, the pit in my stomach that had consumed me for days. But as I lay there in the silence of the night, something in me snapped. I wasn't going to be his victim anymore. I had a choice to make. A real choice. Would I sit here, wallowing in my pain, endlessly replaying his betrayal in my mind? Would I let him be the one to have all the power, to walk away unscathed while I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart? Or would I turn the tables, take control of my life again, and show him that I wasn't the weak, naive girl he thought I was? I thought about the years I had spent with him. All the time, love, and energy I had poured into our relationship. How many nights had I stayed up, planning our future together? How many times had I convinced myself that we were building something real? I had given him everything, my trust, my devotion, my belief that we were meant to be. And what had he done in return? He had used me. He had cast me aside when I stopped being convenient, when the image of the perfect life he had wanted no longer suited him. I had been humiliated. And used. But now it was my turn to make a choice. I could either accept my fate as a victim, broken and alone, or I could rise from this, stronger and smarter than before. I wasn't going to let Jason win. Not this time. I would make him regret everything. Every lie, every moment he thought he could get away with treating me like I didn't matter. I wouldn't just sit back and let him live his life while I was left in the wreckage of ours. No. I would strike first. I would show him that I wasn't some fragile thing to be discarded when it suited him. But how? That was the question that kept me awake the next few nights. How could I make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused me? How could I regain my power, my confidence, and turn this whole situation around? I needed to think. I needed to plan. But what was I really after? Was it revenge? Was it to see him suffer, to watch him crumble under the weight of his own guilt? Maybe. But more than that, it was about reclaiming my life. It was about taking back control of my future. And to do that, I had to stop thinking of myself as the person who had been hurt. I needed to become the person who could make it all happen. Jason had stolen my dignity, my trust, my security. He had shattered everything I thought was solid, everything I believed in. But he had also given me something I hadn't seen before. He had given me the power to change. I wasn't the same person I had been before I caught him with that nurse. The girl who had walked into that room, so certain of her place in the world, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who was determined to get back what she deserved. Someone who would rise from the ashes of this betrayal and make a life for herself, not defined by Jason or by what he had done to me, but by my own strength. The first step was to stop feeling sorry for myself. I had to stop wishing for things to go back to how they were, because they never would. Jason had already shown me who he was. Now it was time for me to show him who I was. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. And I was going to make sure Jason knew that. It was time for me to take action. Confronting Jason had been the easy part. No, it wasn't enough to just face him and demand answers. It wasn't enough to shout at him or let him see my pain. He needed to feel the weight of what he had done. He had stolen my trust, my love, my future, and now it was time to take everything back. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I had always been the one who supported him, who believed in him, who was proud of the life we were building together. I had invested everything into him, and he had ripped it all apart. But now, I was going to show him that I wasn't someone to be discarded, that I wasn't someone who would just lie down and accept my fate. The first step was simple. I needed to get under his skin. I started small, making subtle changes. I dressed differently, in clothes that made me feel powerful and confident, clothes that made me feel like I wasn't just his girlfriend or the woman he had used, I was me again. I stopped waiting for his approval, stopped seeking his validation. I started living my life for myself, doing things I had never done before, things I had always put off because I was too busy trying to make him happy. The more I focused on myself, the more I noticed him looking at me, surprised, confused, even frustrated. He didn't know what to do with this new version of me. Every time he tried to pull me back, to remind me of the past, I pushed away. I wasn't the same person anymore. He wasn't going to control me, and he wasn't going to make me feel guilty for finally putting myself first. But even with all the changes, I knew that wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't hit him where it hurt the most. I had to go deeper. I knew exactly where it would strike him hardest, his career. Jason had always prided himself on his job, his success, the power he wielded. He had used that power for everything, including betraying me. But what he didn't realize was that he had made enemies along the way. People who knew about his shady dealings, people who knew about his little affairs, his lies, his manipulation. And I knew it all. I had always been good at noticing details, connecting dots, reading between the lines. I had learned about how Jason had used his position to exploit people, including me. He had used his power to climb, to manipulate, to cheat, not just in his personal life, but in his professional one as well. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to confront him again, not directly. I didn't need to. I had something far more effective in mind. I started with the people around him, the colleagues he thought he could trust, the ones who helped him cover his tracks. Slowly, quietly, I made sure they knew the truth about Jason. I dropped hints, planted seeds of doubt, and made sure the right people knew exactly what kind of man Jason was. At first, it was small things, subtle comments to coworkers who had been in the dark about his private life. I didn't need to be obvious. I just needed to open their eyes to who Jason really was. It didn't take long before I saw the cracks start to appear in his professional world. Jason's reputation was his armor, his greatest asset. But the more I spread the truth, the more people started to question him. His coworkers started whispering behind his back. His boss began looking at him with suspicion. People started pulling away from him, and Jason had no idea what was happening. He couldn't see the damage I was doing, but I could feel it. The more I chipped away, the more he began to unravel. I wasn't done, though. I had more. I knew about the lies he had told to get ahead at work, about the shady deals he had made behind closed doors. I wasn't going to let him keep using his position to hurt people, to walk around like he was untouchable. It was time to bring it all to light. I leaked the information, slowly, carefully. Anonymous tips here, a confidential email there. I made sure the right people saw the truth about Jason, about his corruption, about his manipulation. I knew it would get back to him, and when it did, I watched from a distance as his world began to implode. His boss called him into his office one morning. There were rumors that his position was in jeopardy. His coworkers started distancing themselves, whispering about his involvement in shady business deals. The more they knew, the more they turned on him. Jason's world was falling apart. And I wasn't done yet. It was only a matter of time before he realized what had happened, before he saw that his career was slipping through his fingers, his reputation crumbling in front of him. And when he did, when he finally realized that it was all my doing, he would understand the depth of the mistake he had made. He had taken everything from me. Now, it was my turn to take everything from him. And I would watch as his world came crashing down, piece by piece. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. Don't get me wrong, watching Jason's world crumble was satisfying, sweet, even. Every crack in his reputation, every loss he faced, made me feel like I was winning. But as the days passed, something unexpected started to shift inside me. I realized I wasn't just enjoying his downfall. No, I was enjoying myself, the person I was becoming. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Jason, or the betrayal, or even the damage he had caused. I was thinking about me. About the person I had buried beneath the layers of guilt, anger, and heartbreak. Slowly, I began to rediscover myself. I started working on my career, really working. I had always put it on the back burner, thinking that I would have plenty of time for my goals after Jason and I were settled. But now, there was no waiting for the right time. The right time was now. Every day, I pushed myself harder, learning new skills, networking, and focusing on the things that mattered to me. It felt good. It felt like I was finally breathing again, like I was no longer confined to the box I had built around myself. Every small victory in my career, every new connection I made, filled me with a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. And I wasn't just building a career. I was building a life. A life that wasn't tethered to Jason. A life that didn't need validation from anyone, especially not him. I started going out with friends, reconnecting with people I hadn't seen in a while. I went to events, I traveled, I explored new hobbies, and I discovered parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my relationship. There was something beautiful in the process of rebuilding. It wasn't easy, some days, it felt like I was moving in slow motion, like my past was still holding on to me, but each day I felt a little bit freer. And that was when it hit me. It wasn't just Jason who needed to feel regret, it was me, too. I had spent so long believing in a future that wasn't real, a future built on lies and empty promises. I had invested years of my life in someone who didn't value me, and in the process, I had lost myself. I had given him so much of me that I didn't even know who I was anymore. I had buried my dreams, my desires, and my true self for the sake of keeping up with the facade of a perfect relationship. But now, I could see it all clearly. I had been trapped in a version of myself that wasn't authentic. I had convinced myself that love was supposed to be about sacrifice, about putting someone else's needs above my own. But in doing that, I had lost touch with the person I was supposed to be. And now, as I rebuilt my life, I realized I didn't need Jason's approval. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was enough. I already knew. The world was mine to conquer. I couldn't believe how quickly everything was changing. The more I focused on myself, the more I saw the possibilities opening up around me. There were opportunities one hadn't even dreamed of before, places I could go, things I could do. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And it felt incredible. Jason's betrayal had shattered me, yes. But it had also freed me. Freed me from the chains of a false love, from a future that had never been mine to begin with. I had spent so long trying to hold on to something that wasn't real. But now, I was ready to let go of all the baggage, the bitterness, the resentment. The weight of it had been holding me down for too long, and I wasn't about to carry it around any longer. I stood on my own now. And that was more than enough. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to happen. I didn't need anyone else to complete me, to validate me, or to make me feel important. I was already whole. The future was full of possibilities, and I was ready to chase them all. No more distractions, no more compromises. I was done with living for someone else. Now, I was living for me. And that was all I needed. Jason may have thought he could break me, but what he didn't realize was that breaking me was the best thing he could have done. Because now, I was stronger than I had ever been. And nothing was going to stop me. I was finally free. It didn't take long for Jason to notice the changes in me. At first, I could see the confusion in his eyes. He wasn't used to seeing me like this, strong, independent, and completely uninterested in his presence. The more I pulled away, the more desperate he became. I could feel the shift, the way he began to reach out, to try and pull me back into his world. It started with a simple text. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Then came the phone calls, one after another. "Please, just listen to me." I didn't pick up. I knew what he was trying to do. He wanted to reel me back in, to convince me that everything could go back to the way it was. But he had no idea who I had become. The woman who had been desperate for his love, the one who had been willing to forgive and forget, was gone. I wasn't that person anymore. I had spent so many years trying to hold on to someone who never truly cared about me the way I deserved. I had allowed myself to believe in his promises, in his fake apologies, in his lies. But now I saw everything clearly. I wasn't going to fall for it again. He didn't give up easily. The calls kept coming, then the messages. He even showed up at my apartment one night. I heard his voice outside my door, desperate, pleading. "I'm sorry," he said through the door. "I know I messed up. Please, just give me a chance to make things right." But there was no part of me that wanted to listen anymore. No part of me that believed his apologies. I just stood there, silent, with my back against the door, my heart beating in a steady rhythm. For a moment, I was tempted. Tempted to open the door and listen to what he had to say. But then I remembered everything, the lies, the betrayal, the hurt. And I knew I couldn't let him back in. He wasn't the man I had loved. And I wasn't the woman who would take him back. As the days passed, I could see his guilt starting to eat away at him. He couldn't hide it anymore. His perfect mask, the one he had worn for so long, was cracking. It was obvious in the way he carried himself now, how his shoulders slumped whenever he walked by me, how he couldn't meet my eyes for too long. He was ashamed, and I could see it. But the truth was, it didn't matter. The damage was done. And as Jason's world started to fall apart, I began to realize just how deep the betrayal had gone. The lies he had told to everyone, including me, were catching up with him. What had seemed like a small affair, a moment of weakness, was now unraveling into something far worse. I had learned more than I ever wanted to know. Jason's infidelity wasn't just with one person. It wasn't just with that nurse. There were others, multiple others. I had stumbled across names, dates, and stories I never would have imagined. Jason had been living a double life, and I had been completely blind to it. I thought about how long he had kept this from me. How many times had I trusted him? How many times had I defended him when people questioned his character? I had believed in him, and he had used that belief to his advantage. He had convinced me that he was my soulmate, that we were meant to be together. But in reality, I had just been another one of his victims. The truth made everything clearer. Jason hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed everyone. His lies had stretched so far, and now they were starting to surface. People who had once admired him, respected him, were now beginning to see him for what he truly was. The higher he had climbed, the harder his fall would be. I could almost feel the weight of it, the inevitability of what was coming for him. And as it all began to unravel, I felt a sense of power that I hadn't felt before. Watching him struggle, watching his life crumble, was strangely satisfying. I knew I was the reason for it all. I had started the chain of events that had led him to this point. He was paying for his actions, and I was watching it happen. But even as I reveled in his downfall, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. I had gotten my revenge. I had watched him suffer, and I had seen his guilt eat him alive. But now, the question lingered, what did I want in the end? Did I want him to come crawling back, begging for my forgiveness? Did I want to see him completely broken, with nothing left? In truth, I wasn't sure. I knew I didn't want him back, not in the way he was asking for. But a part of me wondered if there would ever be closure. Would I ever feel like he had truly paid for what he had done to me? Would I feel better if he had lost everything, his job, his friends, his reputation? I wasn't sure. What I did know was that I had come so far, and there was no going back. I wasn't the woman who had fallen for his lies. I was stronger than that now. I had rebuilt myself, and I had learned to live without him. But still, the question haunted me, what did I really want in the end? Maybe, just maybe, I would find the answer when Jason had nothing left. When his regret was all he had to hold on to. As the days passed, I began to watch Jason lose everything he had worked so hard to build. His job, his reputation, his relationships, all of it started crumbling like dust. The whispers, the subtle shifts in the way people looked at him, the way he began to lose his confidence, everything that had once been solid in his life was now slipping away, piece by piece. I could feel the power shifting in my favor. It was impossible not to. The chain of events I had set in motion was now unraveling his life in a way I had only dreamed of. The higher he had climbed, the harder he was falling, and I was there, watching it happen. Jason had spent so much time hiding behind a perfect image, a well-crafted persona of success and charm. But as the truth began to surface, the facade started to crack. His coworkers no longer looked at him with the same respect. His boss, once one of his biggest supporters, began questioning his loyalty. The company he had once called his kingdom was now a place he could barely step foot in without being met with suspicion. People who had once praised him for his work were now questioning his integrity. I couldn't deny the satisfaction that came with watching him face the consequences of his actions. It felt good, in a way. He had caused me so much pain, and now it seemed like life was finally balancing the scales. The sense of justice was intoxicating. I had every right to feel vindicated. But as time went on, a deeper part of me began to stir, a part of me that I didn't want to acknowledge. I had spent so much time focused on revenge, on watching him suffer, that I hadn't stopped to think about what I really wanted in the end. Did I want to see him completely destroyed? Was that truly what would make me feel whole? Or was there something more? I found myself asking those questions in the quiet moments when the noise of his downfall faded into the background. The mornings when I woke up and didn't immediately think of him. The nights when I closed my eyes, not with a sense of triumph, but with something else, something that felt like emptiness. The truth was, watching Jason lose everything didn't fill the hole in my chest. It didn't heal the wounds he had caused. For all the satisfaction of seeing him brought to his knees, there was a part of me that couldn't help but wonder, is this really enough? Part of me felt guilty for even asking that question. After everything he had done to me, after all the lies, the deceit, the betrayal, wasn't this the justice I deserved? Shouldn't I want to see him fall as far as possible, to lose everything he had taken for granted? And yet, despite everything, there was another part of me, the part that had begun to emerge from the shadows of grief, that longed for something more than revenge. I didn't want to be stuck in the past anymore, clinging to a broken dream of who I thought Jason was. I didn't want to stay in this cycle of bitterness, anger, and regret. I wanted peace. I wanted to heal. For so long, I had let his betrayal define me. I had allowed it to consume my every thought, my every emotion. I had let the anger, the hurt, the desire for retribution take over my life. But now, as I stood on the other side of it all, I realized that I didn't want to be defined by what had happened to me. I didn't want to carry the weight of this broken relationship around with me forever. Jason had already taken so much from me. He had taken my trust, my confidence, my sense of security. But the one thing he couldn't take, the one thing I still had left, was the power to choose how I would move forward. And I didn't want to move forward with anger in my heart. I needed to let go. That realization was harder than I expected. Letting go of my anger, my desire for revenge, felt like giving up on something I had fought so hard for. It felt like a betrayal of the woman who had been wronged. But as I thought about it, I realized that it wasn't giving up, it was finally taking control. It was choosing peace over pain. I had already watched Jason fall, already seen him suffer in ways I had once thought would bring me closure. But the truth was, the only thing that would truly heal me was moving on. I couldn't continue living in the shadow of what had been. I couldn't keep clinging to the bitterness of the past. The idea of forgiveness didn't sit well with me at first. How could I forgive someone who had done something so unforgivable? How could I let go of the anger when he had shattered my world? But then I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about me. It was about releasing myself from the grip of resentment, about freeing myself from the need to punish him. It wasn't about excusing what he had done, or pretending that it hadn't hurt me. It was about finding the strength to move on, to no longer let his actions have power over my happiness. And so, as Jason's world continued to crumble around him, I made the choice to step away from it all. I didn't need to be involved in his downfall anymore. I didn't need to keep watching him fall. What mattered now was my own future. It was time to focus on the person I was becoming, on the life I was building without him in it. I had spent so long looking backward, but now, I was ready to look forward. I was ready to heal. The power had already shifted. And I was taking it with me. The day came when Jason begged for forgiveness. It was a quiet, almost desperate plea, one I hadn't expected to hear. I remember it clearly, the way he stood in front of me, eyes red, shoulders slumped, his usual confident posture completely gone. The man who had once been so full of himself, so certain of his place in my life, was now crumbling. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, can we just talk? I was wrong. I know I hurt you. I know I ruined everything, but I'm sorry. I've realized what I lost. Please, give me a chance to make things right." For a moment, I saw the Jason I had once loved, the one who had known how to say the right words, the one who had once promised me forever. But that man was gone, lost in the wake of his actions. And in that moment, I realized that I had already let go. It was too late. The woman who would have fallen for his words was no longer standing in front of him. I had found my own strength. I had moved past him. He was no longer the center of my world, and his apology, though it might have meant something once, now felt empty. Hollow. I didn't respond right away. I looked at him, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a calm finality. "Jason, I'm not the person I was when you first cheated on me. I don't need you anymore." His face twitched as though he was trying to process my words, but I could see the regret in his eyes. Regret for what he had done, regret for the mess he had created. But as his gaze locked onto mine, I realized something. Karma had already done its job. Jason's downfall was complete. The once proud man who had always relied on his charm and his reputation had watched everything he built crumble to dust. His job? Gone. His relationships? Frayed beyond repair. The people who had once trusted him now looked at him with disgust. Even his so-called friends had distanced themselves, and Jason was left with nothing. It wasn't just that he had lost his job, it was the realization that the truth had caught up with him in ways he couldn't hide. People knew what he had done. The web of lies he had spun to cover his tracks had unraveled. The mask he had worn so carefully had slipped, and the man behind it was exposed. It was only a matter of time before his own guilt tore him apart, and now, in front of me, he was living that reality. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, voice trembling. "But I need you to know how sorry I am. I've lost everything, and I don't know what to do anymore." I could feel his desperation, but it didn't reach me. I wasn't moved by his apology. It wasn't that I didn't care, but the truth was, I had already moved on. I didn't need him to fix what was broken between us because what had been broken wasn't going to be repaired. Not by him, not by me. It was gone, and that was okay. I took a deep breath, looking at him with a sense of clarity. "I hope you find peace, Jason. But I don't need you to find it for me. I've already found my own." For a moment, I thought he might argue, that he might push harder. But instead, he looked at me with a defeated sigh. "I messed up, didn't I?" His voice was raw now, the arrogance gone completely. I nodded slowly, not to rub salt in his wounds, but because it was the truth. "Yes, you did." He stood there for a while, as if waiting for something, maybe another chance, maybe a sign that I could still be the woman who would take him back. But I wasn't that woman anymore. And I wasn't going to let myself slip back into the past, no matter how hard he tried to pull me there. As Jason turned and walked away, I felt no surge of triumph, no rush of victory. It wasn't about that. What mattered was the way I had changed, the way I had evolved from the woman I had been when I first caught him with the nurse. That woman would have cried, begged, or tried to convince him to stay. But I wasn't her anymore. The most powerful revenge wasn't in seeing him suffer. It wasn't in watching his world burn around him, it was in my transformation. When I first walked into that house, months ago, I was a different person. I was broken, confused, betrayed. But now, as I stood there watching him disappear from my life for good, I realized how far I had come. I had rebuilt myself from the inside out. I had found my strength, my independence, my worth. I had rediscovered the woman I had lost, and I had done it without him. Jason's regret didn't matter to me. His apology, his sorrow, his guilt, none of it could undo the damage he had done. And more importantly, none of it could change the person I had become. I wasn't the woman who would wait around for him to come crawling back. I wasn't the woman who needed him to be whole. I was whole on my own. And as I watched Jason's figure disappear into the distance, I felt a quiet peace settle inside me. I didn't need his apology to move forward. I didn't need his regret to heal. I had already healed. And now, the future was mine to embrace. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine to walk. I'd come a long way from the woman I had been just months ago. The journey hadn't been smooth or straightforward. There were days when the weight of everything felt unbearable, when the past seemed to haunt me and the future felt uncertain. But as I stood here now, looking out at the path ahead, I realized that all of it, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the anger, the confusion, had shaped me into someone stronger. Someone wiser. I had learned so much about myself over the last few months. I had discovered a strength inside me that I didn't know existed, a resilience that had helped me rise from the ashes of my broken life. I had found the power of letting go, the power of releasing the past and stepping into the future without the baggage of pain weighing me down. And, most importantly, I had learned the importance of self-worth. For so long, I had tied my sense of value to someone else's approval, to someone else's love. I had let Jason's actions define my worth, as if his betrayal was somehow a reflection of who I was. But no more. I had stopped measuring my value based on his treatment of me. I had stopped believing that my happiness depended on him. Now, I knew that my happiness came from within. It came from choosing myself, from prioritizing my own growth, my own peace, and my own future. And that future didn't have room for Jason anymore. Jason was a chapter in my past. A painful lesson that had shaped me in ways I couldn't have imagined at the time. But that's all he was now, a chapter. One that I had closed. I thought about everything I had gone through, everything I had lost, and I realized that it had all been necessary. It had been a wake-up call, a catalyst for change. If Jason hadn't betrayed me, I would never have found the strength to leave him behind. If he hadn't broken my heart, I would never have learned to rebuild it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led me here, standing on the edge of a new beginning. And that new beginning didn't involve him. I didn't need him to feel whole anymore. I didn't need his approval to move forward. What I needed was to believe in myself, to trust that I had the ability to create a life that was better than the one I had imagined with him. As the days passed, I focused on myself. I poured my energy into my career, into my passions, into the things that brought me joy. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, who reminded me of my worth. I reconnected with friends I had lost touch with during my relationship with Jason. I laughed more, I dreamed bigger, and I learned to love the woman I was becoming. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I felt the sting of loneliness, when I wondered if I would ever find someone who could make me feel the way Jason once had. But those moments became less frequent as time went on. I realized that I didn't need someone else to fill the space in my heart. I was enough on my own. I had always been enough. I just needed to believe it. One evening, as I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset, I thought about everything that had led me to this point. I thought about how far I had come, how much I had changed. The woman I was before had been naive, desperate for love, willing to sacrifice everything for someone who didn't deserve it. But the woman I was now was different. Stronger. Wiser. More certain of who she was. And that was the most empowering thing of all. Jason might have been part of my past, but he didn't control my future anymore. He had taken enough from me. The power was mine now. The future was mine. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I smiled to myself. The road ahead was still uncertain, still full of twists and turns. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready. Ready to step forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. I had been reborn. And I was no longer defined by the past. The future was waiting for me, and I wasn't going to waste another moment looking back. I closed that chapter of my life, and with it, I closed the door on the past. There had been a time when I couldn't imagine ever letting go of everything Jason had done to me. I had been consumed by anger and hurt, trapped in a cycle of resentment and revenge. But the longer I lived with those emotions, the more I realized they were not helping me. They were only keeping me tethered to a version of myself that no longer existed. A version that had been broken by betrayal, but also one that hadn't yet learned how to heal. And so, with a deep breath and a firm decision, I closed the door on the past. The anger, the hurt, the regret, all of it. It wasn't easy. There were days when the memories crept in, when the pain from the betrayal resurfaced. But over time, I learned to let those feelings go. Slowly but surely, I freed myself from them. The wounds I had carried for so long had begun to heal. Not completely, of course. There were scars that would remain, reminders of what I had endured. But those scars no longer had power over me. They no longer defined me. The pain, the humiliation, the sense of betrayal, they were part of my story, but they were no longer the central theme. I had reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed me. I wasn't the woman who had begged for answers, the woman who had fallen apart at the first sign of Jason's indifference. I wasn't the woman who had stayed up nights, wondering what went wrong or hoping he would come back. That woman had vanished, and in her place stood someone far stronger, someone who had learned to trust herself again. I had come out on the other side, and with each passing day, I felt more and more like myself. The confidence that had been buried under the weight of betrayal began to resurface. I stood taller, spoke with more conviction, and embraced the world around me with a new sense of purpose. I didn't need revenge to feel fulfilled anymore. I had spent so much time fantasizing about making Jason feel the way I had, about making him regret his actions, about watching him suffer. And while that had brought me a sense of justice, it wasn't enough. It wasn't what I truly needed. What I needed was closure. Closure wasn't something Jason could give me. It wasn't something I could find in his apology or in his regret. Closure came from within. It came from finally accepting that what had happened to me was not my fault. It came from forgiving myself for allowing it to happen, for staying when I should have walked away long before. And it came from knowing that I was worthy of better, of more. The moment I realized that, everything shifted. I didn't need Jason's approval, his apology, or his regret to move forward. I didn't need anything from him. All I needed was to let go of the past and embrace the future. And so, I did. The future had always been something I feared. After everything that had happened, it seemed impossible to imagine a life without the person I had built my world around. But now, the future felt like a promise. A promise to myself that I would not allow the mistakes of the past to hold me back. A promise to take control of my life, to pursue my dreams, and to never again put my happiness in the hands of someone else. It wasn't just about getting over Jason, it was about becoming the woman I was always meant to be. As I stood at the threshold of this new chapter in my life, I couldn't help but feel proud. Proud of how far I had come, of how much I had grown. The journey had been painful, but it had been necessary. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led me here. And I was stronger because of it. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value my own worth, and to embrace the power of change. I had learned that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was already whole. And for the first time in my life, I knew that I was enough, exactly as I was. As I took the first steps into this new chapter, I felt a sense of freedom that was indescribable. The weight of the past no longer hung over me. The chains that had once held me captive had been broken. I was free to live my life on my own terms, to chase my dreams without looking over my shoulder. I had become the woman I was always meant to be. The woman who knew her worth. The woman who wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. The woman who understood that she could stand on her own and be powerful. The road ahead wasn't paved with guarantees, but that didn't scare me. In fact, it excited me. The unknown was no longer something I feared, it was something I embraced. Because I knew that whatever came next, I was ready for it. I had already overcome the hardest part. Jason was no longer a part of my story. He was a chapter one had closed long ago. He had been a painful lesson, but that lesson had shaped me into someone new. Someone who was now free to live her life without him in it. And as I moved forward, I knew that the future held something far better than I had ever imagined. It was my time now. I had taken control of my own narrative, and I was going to write it the way I wanted. No more looking back. Only forward. I closed that chapter of my life, and with it, I closed the door on the past. It wasn't something I had done in a single moment. No, it was a slow, deliberate process. There had been days, weeks, even months, where the pain from my past weighed so heavily on me that I thought I would never escape it. The memories, the hurt, had seeped into every corner of my life, making it hard to breathe, hard to move forward. But somehow, I did. Slowly, I started to rebuild, to reclaim pieces of myself that had been buried for too long. The wounds I carried had healed, but not completely. There were scars, ones I would carry for the rest of my life, but they no longer controlled me. They no longer defined me. I had spent so long believing that believing that the betrayal, the pain, the lies, would follow me forever. But it was as though with each passing day, I chipped away at the wall I had built around myself. The wall I thought would protect me, but in reality, had just trapped me. Now, I was free. And the freedom felt unimaginable. It was the kind of freedom that came from accepting that the past was just that, the past. I had to stop allowing it to dictate my every move, my every thought. Yes, I'd been hurt. Yes, I'd been betrayed. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the woman who cried herself to sleep, who doubted herself at every turn. I had risen from that, stronger than ever. The hardest part, I realized, wasn't letting go of him or the relationship we'd once had. The hardest part was forgiving myself. For months, I had blamed myself. For not seeing the signs. For being too trusting. For giving too much. I had carried the weight of it all, thinking that somehow it was my fault. But in time, I understood that it wasn't. His actions were his own. They didn't reflect my worth or my love. They reflected his choices, and I had no control over those. I didn't need revenge to feel fulfilled, I needed closure. Revenge had crossed my mind more times than I cared to admit. The desire to make him feel what I felt, to somehow take back the control he'd stolen from me, was all-consuming at one point. I had imagined his life falling apart, imagined him begging for my forgiveness, imagined a grand moment of payback where I would rise above, stronger and victorious. But revenge had never been what I truly needed. What I needed was closure. I needed to know that I was okay, that I could move on without looking back. Once I found that, everything shifted. There was no dramatic moment where I decided, this is it. I'm moving on. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was gradual, like the seasons changing, one day blending into the next. It started with small things, getting out of bed in the morning and smiling at my reflection, no longer feeling the weight of guilt hanging over me. It started with being able to think about the good things I had learned from the relationship, how much I had grown, how much I had learned about what I wanted and deserved in life. And slowly, those thoughts began to overshadow the pain. But even then, the hardest part came next, realizing that I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology or a gesture of remorse. I wasn't waiting for things to fall back into place, because I understood now that they never would. And that was okay. I had spent far too long waiting for him to change, to somehow fix everything that had gone wrong. But the truth was, the only person who could fix my life was me. The day I closed the door on him for the last time was not a day of triumph, as I had once imagined. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, peaceful, almost understated. I simply stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped worrying about whether or not he'd come back, whether or not he'd regret it. Because, in the end, it didn't matter. I had my life to live, and he no longer had a place in it. It was my time now. The weight of those words hit me hard one morning as I was sipping coffee on my balcony, the sun rising in the distance. For the first time, I saw the world as it was, full of possibility, full of choices, full of new beginnings. I realized that I had become the woman I was always meant to be, not because of him, but despite him. I had found a version of myself I hadn't even known existed. A version who was strong, capable, and worthy of love, peace, and happiness. I no longer needed anyone's approval to feel validated. I no longer needed to prove my worth. I had learned to look at myself with love and kindness, and that, more than anything, was the key to my freedom. The future felt bright, no longer clouded by past mistakes or regrets. The past was gone. And I was moving forward, not with anger or fear, but with hope. As I sat there, watching the sunrise, I felt at peace for the first time in so long. It wasn't that everything was perfect. Life was still unpredictable. But I understood now that I had the strength to face whatever came next. I had built my foundation on something stronger than love for someone else. It was a love for myself. And that was all I needed.